Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Teresa.
And we are the co-authors of the book, Pass the Baton, Empowering All Music Students.
Our goal is to share stories of educators who are passing the baton and empowering their music students. We want to help teachers create music lessons that transform students from passive consumers to vibrant creatives. Welcome back to the Pass the Baton podcast. We're here to talk about all things student empowerment and music education. Before we introduce today's guest, we want to remind you to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes.
In addition, if you like what you hear today, please consider leaving a rating or review. That's what helps podcasts like Pass the Baton grow.
Right. So this conversation with Krystal was so much fun. And I love that we went into it with very much a technology focus. And we did talk a lot about technology, but also just the little insights she gave about student ownership in her classroom was really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, so many practical tips that you could take and use. And also just like, I feel like I got a great feel for the excitement in the band room of like kids doing, all these different things, but on task doing the work.
Yeah.
And reaping all the benefits of that.
Exactly. And she even was, you could tell the relationship building that went on. And she touched on it a little bit, but you could just see that in what she was talking about. And that's been another common thread through, a lot of these conversations we have. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think at one point she did say, it's us, it's not me on the podium. It's us. Right. It's our band. That was awesome.
Yeah. All right. Welcome back, everybody. It's great to have you here today. We're so excited to welcome today's guest, Krystal Williams. I think I first met Krystal through Women Band Directors, which we've had a couple WBDI guests on the podcast, which is awesome. And then more recently, I've been hearing about the great work she's doing in music ed with technology. Some good stuff we'll get into today. So Krystal, hi. Thanks for being here.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about tech.
Yeah. Oh, and we love talking about tech. So this is going to be great. Could you take a minute, maybe introduce yourself, tell us about your background and your current teaching role?
Yes. So my name is Krystal Williams. I'm originally from Maryland. I was born in DC and moved to the suburbs of Maryland. I am a product of Prince George's County Public Schools, which is where I currently teach. I also teach at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County as a woodwind adjunct. And I have a podcast, which is called Diary of a Lady Band Director, which kind of spawned from me ranting during the pandemic, like a lot of us. And I went to Morgan State University. I came to Baltimore in 1999. I'm dating myself. As a music major, I'm a first generation college student. So the whole experience of leaving home, the whole experience of going to college, and the whole experience of being a music major was new to my entire family. And I successfully matriculated in 2005, went straight through grad school, went back to Morgan. Crazy enough, decided to go to another university for music education at the same time for conducting. Yeah, completely insane, full time, both programs. And I started teaching in Baltimore City schools in 2006. And I stayed there up until this past school year, uninterrupted as a band director. And my longest stint band directing was at Northwestern High School, which is the oldest all-girl public high school in the nation. I think they're celebrating 180 years. Decided to have a change of pace, wanted to go back home to PG, also known as Prince George's County. And now I teach at a performing arts high school as a music theory and composition teacher, of course, like with UMBC and with podcasting and with being a clinician, something I got into during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's great. You are busy, busy. So how did you get started in tech and using tech in your music classes?
So, like a lot of music educators, what I thought I was going to be able to do in the classroom with resources and things coming out of college was not what I ended up with. My first teaching gig, they hired me to be a band director. It was a new charter school. They had no instruments. They had nothing. And they didn't really plan on what that was going to look like. So my first couple of years was really trying to build inventory to support the program that they hired me to teach. And I just felt outgunned. And I felt like that for at least, I'll say 8 years. I started teaching at another charter school called KIPP. And I had resources, but the kids had no music background. Like it was just take 6th grade for a quarter, take 7th grade for a quarter, take 8th grade for a quarter, and do a band in 1 quarter, which was not how I grew up with band. So how I ended up with technology is, like I said, I felt outgunned. I just didn't know how to do it like this without resources, without background information from the kids, not even like general music classes. A lot of my students hadn't even had a general music class. And so I started going to conferences because I don't like feeling defeated. And I went to a conference and I saw smart music and I was like, And then I remembered that my college professor, Melvin Miles at Morgan State, was using smart music with like the trumpet majors. And he was always very techy. He was always on the front end of like technology, like when the Apple computers and all of that type of sound setup, he had it when we moved into the new fine arts building. The fine arts building was state of the art, still is one of the best facilities in the state. And I was just like, I could use this. And so I started out very low tech. When I say low tech, I didn't have a projector. I didn't have a smart board. I didn't have any of those things. So being a little innovative, my husband is a tech by trade. He works for Sharp. So I am not a tech person by design. I was kind of thrown into it. And like anything, you learn it as you go along. So I started out with a projector. I got off of Donors Choose. And I said, I'm going to project it on shower board because I had those old school chalkboards. Nobody was putting, the dry erase board in the band room. Mm-hmm. And I said, my kids seem to be very engaged in just having like a PowerPoint lesson and having little video clips. And then Chromecast came out. And I said, I can plug the Chromecast directly into the projector. And then I said, so now I can, like, the lack of resources, I can project from my laptop. That's where I started. But then I realized, I said, well, I have this phone. If I have Chromecast, I can cast from my phone to this screen. And then I started using apps from my phone. So I got smart and I said, I have a Bluetooth speaker. So it came from a projector to a laptop to my phone with Chromecast. And then adding on to that, I managed to get the Alumni Association at my school to buy a flat screen TV. And my husband came in on a Saturday and he mounted it. And I said, dual monitors. So I can project from the projector, but I could also split screen and have a tuner up. And I just watched how that changed because my students couldn't afford tuners. They can barely afford the instruments that we really had, like resources. All of those came from me in fundraising. And so I realized I could catch them up, so to speak, with all this tech. And so it came into my best practices. I can just have the tuner on for my phone. I could be taking attendance from the door, project this tonal energy app, and students can tune themselves. Wow, that saves me a lot of time. And it just got to the point where eventually it evolved from me allowing students to use their phones. And they can project things to the screen. And I was like, oh man, this is just getting better and better. And so I just kind of evolved from one thing to a plethora of things. And somehow people started to notice it. And I was like, y'all didn't think about these things before? And that's just ultimately how I ended up being the music tech chair for the state. It's very hilarious to me.
That's so fun to hear because I think sometimes people feel like, but I'm not techie, or I don't have a budget, or I don't have, but what you're saying is you don't have to start with all the things. You can just start with one little thing and learn that, and then add the next thing and add the next thing. And I'll be honest, that's like the same way I got started, right? It was just starting with one little thing and then be like, this is really cool. What could I do next? So I like hearing that.
I also feel like it's really the power of, what can you do? I think we always get stuck in like, I can't do things. I don't have this. Right. We're just natural sometimes to focus on the can't, but just the can of like, I have my phone and I could make this happen. The power of like, what do I have and what can I make what I have work? A lot of good things come out of that when you think that way.
Yeah. And when you don't have no one to like, and I'm not saying that I didn't have no one, like I had other teachers that, helped mentor me. But when it comes to like music, if you're the only one in the department, it's just you. Yep. And a lot of my colleagues were dealing with the same stuff, but I would hear a lot of complaints, but like not a lot of solutions. And so I'm a trial and error girl. I was like, let me just try something. And when I would see a response from students, I would say, let's keep that. Or I would goof through something, and the students really helped me through that process because they often are already using, technology way ahead of us. It's just like, oh, Miss Williams, you can just do that. And I'm like, I'm writing that down. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And we're like tricking them into realizing that the tech can be used for learning in school. Right. So that's always fun. So when I listened to you on a podcast with Robbie Burns, and Robbie was on our podcast. I can't remember what episode, but just great techie guy. One thing that really caught my attention was when you talked about how the technology was giving the students ownership, and it was like, all the flashing lights in my head were like, yes, this is amazing. So, you mentioned being able to project things in the tuner, but can you talk about how that part of it? How are you using the tech to give the students ownership and to empower your young musicians?
So it happened out of I call it good, not bad, like a good, bad situation where band directors always want a big program. We always want a lot of people. And I decided that I needed a big band. How do you get a big band? You recruit. Well, I over recruited. It's like people like there's a such thing. Oh, yes, there is. When you have 80 instruments, I recruited 120 young ladies. And they were engaged. I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be hard. I didn't have like this huge staff. Like when you go to some of these big programs, they have like the staff to support it. They have the resources. I didn't have any of that. So I was trying to duplicate myself. And I was able to talk to the technology person in the building. And I said, do you have 3 computers you can spare out the lab? They don't have to run a lot. I just need them to run one program. And really at the time that was like smart music, just one program. And I'll put these in the practice rooms. And when a kid is not quite cutting it on this instrument, because everybody were beginners. Out of that 120, 98 were beginners. How am I going to do this? I had 6 band classes. I was like, this is insane. I'm losing my mind. I need something that can tell them they're right or wrong, and I can send them there. So then I sent them to, practice rooms. Like when it's not working, I would send a couple. Flutes, go to practice room 1 and just log in and do something here. And I could post it very quickly. Oh God, please get them through incantations and dance. And that was my mindset. And they would come out successful. And I was like, oh, you actually did it? Like, instead of me waiting, in band land, we get used to hurry up and wait. Kids are expected to be quiet. And then you work on like the flute section for 20 minutes and everyone's gouging their eyes out. And so that was where the self-efficacy came from. I said, well, let me flip my classroom. I flipped my classroom before it was popular because I was outnumbered. I said, this is chaos. This isn't like I have flutes on period 1 in clarinet. I have every band class was a full band. It was insane. And so I would send a percussion in the hallway and I said, hey, download that Vic Firth app and learn all of them. But they would come back and they did it. And I was like, you mean to tell me I didn't have to be out there? Like, you didn't know this. You didn't know this. And I was like, and I was sending like these accountability sheets and started out printed, but then it turned into a Google form. And I could post it at the beginning of class, put a QR code up. Everybody, here's the accountability sheet. Pull out your phone. They're like this. They already have their phones out anyway. And I was like, you want an A or an F? That was my mantra. Do you want an A or an F? You get an A for working on stuff and documenting what you didn't do well and you did well. That's self-efficacy. And I went to a couple of PDs about building self-efficacy, and I didn't realize I was building more self-efficacy in my students from not being on the podium all the time versus being in front of them. That direct instruction. I feel like band directors, performing ensembles, we're the last one to change. Like everybody's kind of gone into group work, but we never knew how to organize it because, to be honest, young students, they'll either go goof off or they don't really know how to assess themselves. You have to teach them how to assess themselves, like from day one. Like, does it sound good or bad? Check yes or no, like one of those little love letters. And so my form was really like, did you meet the standard for today? And they would have to like copy the standard. And then I built the form with the standard in. Did you play with 80% or above accuracy? Look at your smart music score. Then it turned into practice first. Look, is it there? No, we didn't meet the goal today. And it really turned into students wanting to beat their own achievement versus me giving them an achievement to reach. And that was where it kind of blew up, flipping the classroom. And less time in front of me, they learned more. I know, go figure.
but you're so right, because I mean, I'll speak as a band director as well. That's all we've ever experienced is the teacher standing in front of us, telling us whether it was right or wrong. Like, that was wrong, that was right, do it better. Like, but that's how we were brought up, and we just assume that that's how it needs to be. And also the models that we follow, right? Growing up, the Philadelphia Orchestra, because I was a Pennsylvania girl, that was, you follow them and the conductors in front making the music, right? And we get this idea that that's what successful band is, or successful orchestra chorus is teacher in front telling the ensemble what to do. But what you're saying is that the kids can be successful, maybe even more successful, if you're not always up in front.
And my experience, they have been more successful. So I'm a believer of it's not broke, don't fix it. And it was interesting to watch the transition, because teacher evaluations always, they can be all over the place depending on who's observing you. I remember watching us have this direct instruction goal. And 100%, I remember teach like a champion, 100% engagement. And I said to myself, in a band room, that's impossible. Like, if we have to work through music, someone has to be quiet. And no, they can't be just playing their instrument while I'm working with them. How do I have everyone engaged? Oh, okay. Well, on your phone, you have an assessment sheet for that section. So yeah, I'm working with them, but your grade is coming from you listening to them and you giving them feedback. And, that's that self-assessment when it comes to teacher evaluation, students being self-aware of the standards that they're meeting or not meeting gets the highest rating. But nobody really ever knows how to do that. And so it just turned into, all right, I don't want to get a 2 or a 1 on my evaluation. How do I get students to get me that 4? Because there's no way with 60 of you in this room, every period, with various personalities and various, goals. And then we talk about differentiation, which is a whole nother level. I said, I can't do this without it. And it's very low tech. And a lot of people, there's a lot of pushback during the pandemic. And I've been dealing with this pushback for 10 years, from doing professional development for the district that I left. And now I do professional development for the district that I'm in. People have bitten on the apple a little bit more, but in the beginning it was much like, I don't know how to do any of this. I was like, I didn't either. It just takes one thing. And the students will show you. It's like, dude, they won't actually do it. I was like, yeah, they will. You want an A or an F? And that became my mantra.
Yeah. And I think something that So could you explain a little bit further than like, what does it look like? So they're not all with you, right? You're not on the podium and you're not leading the whole group. So like, what does that look like in the band room? Because I think other people will say, okay, but I am going to get evaluated. And yes, I want the student data to show this growth. But if I let them all go all different directions, well, my admins see chaos, So can you explain kind of like, what is it like? And
it started with me in student leadership, and realizing that there was a lot of kids who really were doing those type of things, but I was in the way. Like they're talking while I'm trying to give instruction, but they're really trying to help their friend. Like, hey, no, it's C. We've all been there. Like, no, it's C, because they wanted to sound good. So I put the responsibility on section leaders, and I was doing this as early as 6th grade beginning band. And I was like, you own the form. You know, that kid that can't sing themselves all the way together, give them something that keeps them busy. Oh, you're the one with the form today. And if you don't turn it in, that's your grade. And they're like, I can at least do that. And I'm like, yeah, you can. And training them, one, that when they go off together, they are the teacher. You're the person I'm depending on. You're the one who has the information. And a lot of kids really appreciate that affirmation. Like, you believe in me enough. And, there's always a box. If you are off task, you're not engaged, guess what? A or F. And they're like, well, where's the evidence come from? They have smartphones. I would make them record the entire sectional time. We call it shed time, self-help, educational development. As musicians, we say, you go into the shed. I was like, go to the shed. It sounds bad. Go to the shed. Y'all need shed time. Or then students started asking, section leaders started asking, can we go shed, Miss Williams? This isn't good. Like, yes, you can. Now I can work with percussion. Great. And so when they go to those times, first of all, it's timed. The students will have a timer. It started out with those little kitchen timers. I went to the dollar store and got like a bunch of magnetic timers. They would put it on the stand. Everybody synchronized. Go. It's like a football play. And it started out with very short amount of time, 10 minutes. 10 minutes, you need to know measures 1 through 8. And they were like, 10 minutes. But there's always an assessment at the end of that. And a lot of mentors like, you assess your students every day. Yeah, yep, I do. On little chunks, measures 1 through 8. What are you listening for, Mrs. Williams? I'm listening for improvement. Can you play more notes than you could before? Did y'all fix the rhythm? And they would have a box. Are we working on pitch, rhythm, intonation, phrasing, this section, or the whole song? And of course, in the beginning, you tell them what they're working on. And eventually they just know. They're like, oh, and we would have sessions before I send them to this shed time. I would tell everybody, take out a pencil. That's 1 point. Everybody has a pencil because we want musicians to have pencils, right? And they was like, all right, go through the music real quick and circle everything you can't do. Write that down on your form. It was paper, then it turned into type it in your form. That goes directly to me. So I can tell if you did it or not in real time. And I would read off names. So Katie, I don't have your form right now. Before you go to that shed, I need to know what you're working on. And they're like, this lady is insane. But part of it was always seeming like I was a step ahead of them with sending them to, it's group work. And you do it in English class. They go into the four desks, and then they have a writer, and they have a scribe, and they have a timekeeper. And all those jobs still existed just within a section. Also empowered the kid who might have been struggling with a job, and they get a point because they're doing a job, even if they're struggling through the music. So they're like, oh, I finished the form and we didn't have measures 9 through, and they use that language that we want them to use. And so when my first evaluation where I tried it, there was some skeptic. It was very skeptical. My AP came in, and the students came in. They grabbed the form out the sheet coming in the door. Each section went to the tuner before I had phones and stuff, because this was middle school. They didn't, at that time, didn't have phones. And they would stand around the tuner, kind of like a little football huddle. And then they would go sit down in another section and get up. And she was like, I hadn't talked. I was literally just taking attendance and sometimes pretending like I'm writing, but not really. And she looked very like, what am I walking into? And then they came and I said, everybody look on the board. Everybody, a section, you see the laundry list, write that down on your form. And then I sent them to the four corners of the school and she looked horrified. Oh my gosh, she looked like, no. And she started to look at some of the students in this class. I was like, that kid is the one with the power. This is going to be bad. And so she decided to go with the group that looked like the group of the most challenging. And she came back with that group and she said, I can't believe it. She said, the person you had in charge, which I was a little, he was on it. He was on it and everybody was working and he didn't allow no downtime. I said, yeah, no one believes in that kid. And he knows I believe in him. So ironically, now that kid's a cop. It's right. I don't know if I influenced that power or that kind of order, but she was just like, everybody went and worked on things and they assessed themselves and they had to report out. Like they just went to court and the jury came back with a verdict. And you didn't say too many negative things. You agreed or added to it. And they played the music together in the last like 20 minutes of class. And she was like, this is, I just asked, what's your accountability if they get off task? I said, well, we've built a lot of trust. Now they have phones. I could just put them on a Zoom. Mm-hmm. Like, I see you. I see you. You're not doing anything. And they're like, oh no, we were just. I was like, that looks like Minecraft to me. And just kind of being with it the same way you're with it when they're in front of you.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things that you were saying that I'm just nodding my head and thinking like, yes. And I always love the day that the administrator comes in when the kids are working independently, because if you just listen, it sounds like complete and utter chaos. But then when you see what the students are doing, that's when it's really special. I also liked how you said, this was a little while ago, that the goal was improvement. Mm-hmm. And I think we sometimes forget about that, especially, as musicians, we have this, it has to be perfect. The notes are perfect. That's the goal. And yes, obviously we want the kids to play the notes and rhythms correctly. And we want it musical and all of that. But when we're really looking at each and every kid, it's going to be different. So if we can find improvement and we can encourage them to always be looking to improve, I think that's such a more powerful message.
Yeah. I also think like the benefits I heard that kids had, like you didn't even say anything when they walked in, right? The admin's watching and like, they just came in and went, like there was no time wasted, right? Like they knew what to do. They took it on their own. When they were in groups, they were making themselves their own goals for themselves. They held themselves accountable. They were leadership, a leadership role for kids. Like, I mean, all those things, like student ownership is just there to be seen, right? Which is just really amazing, but really awesome. And I think there probably are times, like you'd said that, kids get off a task or something. We all do as humans, right? And then there's just a discussion about, what happened? How do we get back on task? Like you said, they have to learn those things. They have to kind of learn and also realize, I think what's nice is that at the end, they come back as a group and perform together as a whole. I'm a part of a whole. Like it matters what my group does because my section is going to affect the rest of the group. So there's just so many awesome things happening there for the learner experience. I just think it's great.
Yeah. The one thing I learned or had to unlearn was the power of the podium. Mm-hmm. Like, and that comes, that often comes from like a male perspective, like I'm the one in charge. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm not the one in charge, who's in charge? All of us. Mm-hmm. All of us are in charge. This is your band room too. And if it doesn't sound good and we go perform somewhere and there's this assessment, we all own that. Mm-hmm. But I always tell them, I said, when y'all do good, y'all get all the credit. When y'all do bad, I get all the blame. So there's and the students would laugh. He was like, no, we got you, Miss Williams. We got you. And they take that ownership, and they will always supersede my expectations when I started this approach. Because they cared too. And it has to be intrinsic. And I didn't really have a competitive band. Like, we weren't going to competitions and things, but they always treated every performance like there's a grade, but not in the formal sense of what's going to go in the grade book. Like, there's a grade and the audience is going to respond, and we affect that. And so they own it. And once they own it, they just take it and run. And you're just a passenger sometimes. You're like, oh, that's great. Can we write music? Yeah, sure. Okay. Just take up more time. Okay.
Yeah, that's fun. So you mentioned, let's see, like smart music and practice first, Google Forms, like QR codes, stuff like that. Is there any other tech that you use that you would think that is kind of giving that ownership? And if not, that's fine too, but I wasn't sure.
No, it's a whole list.
Oh, okay.
When I do tech sessions, I always say that there's 4 you need. Utility apps, that's fingering charts, that's things that help them find the answer without asking you.
Yes.
Tuner, metronome, those are utility. Take out your phone, that's the very first thing that download as beginners. Then I move to like a phase 2. Something that personally helps you. I always have some type of theory reinforcement app. Right now, I'm using through Music First, Musician and Aurelia, because we don't have a lot of time to teach theory when you're a band director. We just don't have time. That was always the thing that I was fighting the most when I was doing band. So they can use that. It's a Music First app, or it's under the Music First classroom. And the lessons there and the examples are there. And then they can practice. So that became drills. And some people like, you took out time in your class for them to do theory and not go straight to the music. I said, I had to. If you have a bunch of beginners that have never read music and they've gotten to high school, which was my case, it has to come from somewhere. And so I will allow them like 10 minutes. Oh, do note reading for 10 minutes. Improve your score. All right, take a screenshot. Send me that score. And it takes a little time. You put it into a little Excel sheet and you say, look at how you improved. You put it on a little star chart. So Musician Aurelia is for my ear training and my theory. So we got utility apps, we got theory and ear training. Kids need it. And then my third thing is something that is global. Right now, globally, I'm using Google because everything speaks to it. Yes. I could put YouTube videos, everything speaks across the board to it. And of course, there are other management systems like Canvas. We're moving to Canvas next year, but even still, a lot of Google stuff speaks. And then, so we've got utility, we've got the ear training theory, we've got the global apps. Those are things like PDF writer and whatever. And then finally, my communication device or my communication app, mass communication. How do I communicate with my students on the drop of a dime? That started out as Ramon, and now it is the band app, because you can just post anything. And that helped me communicate to parents, students. I could put links to Google stuff there, to my Google class and my Google site. And it all kind of began to house like everywhere I want you to go. And sometimes there's that SEL part. Band kids are connected to their band directors. They just are. And I have a student who likes to fish, and he uses it to communicate with me because I'm a country girl, and he communicates things he's done on the weekend. And I know for him, that's a SEL thing. Like, hey, look at this fish I caught. For my band parents, when they would take pictures or we go on trips, I didn't have to beg for pictures. They would just put it in the album and it's secure. And so that's kind of how I'm using tech. I have 4 things. I always tell people start with 1. Start with 1 and master that 1. And if you use that 1 until the wheels fall off, that's kind of what I did from the start until I got more comfortable.
I think that's good advice, because you're right. You don't need to dive in and do every single thing at the first time. That's like recipe for disaster.
The pandemic.
Well, yeah, we learned that quickly. And it's also hard for the students, right? If you suddenly throw all of these new tech tools at students, remember, we're only one of their teachers, because they may have 5 other teachers who have done the same thing with different things, different tools. So we need to start with the one and build from there. I think that's right.
And I do schedule a tech day. Like I do when I roll out something new. There is always this moment in time for my students, and when I present to other teachers, where this is play. You have to play with it. It's not low stakes. You take out your instrument, you play at practice first. You see how it responds. You, the student, here's a new app. Here's Soundtrap. You play with it. I'm getting a grade for just playing with it. Yeah, just play with it. You give me a grade for making beats? Yep. Yes, I am. Does it have to be good? Nope. Doesn't have to be good.
Yeah.
Just do something. See what that's the create standard. I always fuss at conferences, like everyone runs from create. Isn't that what music is? Music is creation. And so, but it's got to be low stakes enough for kids to feel vulnerable. And the best way is just let them play with it. When I teach composition with my theory students, I let them explore first. And then I give them the rules of part writing, and then they hate me for the rest of their life. But and that's where we are now with my AP students. They're like, Ms. Williams, you tricked us. We started out with a theme and variation on something simple. I say, yeah, you did. No, species counterpoint.
But no, you're so right. Just let them explore. I mean, we could even, if you wanted to give it a fancy title, call it inquiry, right? You're giving them something and letting them ask questions and push buttons and try things. And that's huge for the learning process. I think we get so stuck in this, like, there's one right way to do it, and I know that way, and I'm going to tell you. No, just let them do it. It's more fun.
We used to call them participation grades. No, it's not quite participation. Like, you gauged it and you put some framework on it. Say at the end of class, you have to have 8 measures of something. Yeah. And how do I assess it? Does it sound good to you?
Yeah.
And then they're like honest, and sometimes it's good and they don't think it's good. I'm like, oh, this is going somewhere. And they're like, oh, Miss Williams, this is trash. I was like, let's look at why do you think that, and see if we can kind of find a way to make it better. Yeah. We're always going to make it better versus that hard grade that everybody goes with.
We can't put too much right or wrong in music. We all have things we like and things we don't like, and we can respect that. Yeah.
I tell them if they can defend it, you might win me. Yeah. And they come with strong arguments.
That's what we want. I want them to be passionate about what they've made, and I want them to be excited about it. It's a good thing.
So I think one question we keep asking everyone recently is this, something we all struggle with, I think, of the balance between, giving kids student ownership in the classroom, but then also worried about the performance expectations, worried about our next performance. So how do you balance those two?
So when it comes to expectations with students and performances, because we're always approaching it from making the next one better, on the Monday, I used to call it after something, when I had marching band, it was like the Monday after the game. We will make a laundry list and we would write it on the board and say, hey, what went well, what didn't? And students would take a poll vote once I started doing it digitally. And then they would say, yeah, we do have to work on this. I think we're so busy trying to convince kids what to work on that we miss that they're smart. They're actually smart. Yeah, like, go figure. And so I always put the standards of what we're trying to meet, and I let the majority decide if we've met the standard. So it's very democratic. I always tell them the president, can veto. And so that keeps them kind of honest.
Yeah.
Sometimes they grade themselves harder than I would grade them.
Sure.
Yes.
But it does keep them honest when I say, go back and look at the rubric. It's in the Google form that you're looking at. Look at how many things you had to meet for it to be highly effective or achieve. And I use those words. So when it's time for evaluation time, they're like, the students are talking the same rubric talk. I said, yes, they are. So you better write me down for all those fours. But I always put it back on them and make sure that they know exactly in very plain, simple words. I always take like the state assessment sheet and pare it down to things they can. I said, there's no gray area. Check yes or no. Mm-hmm. Like they start to sit there on the fence and they're like, nah, it's no. And they look so sad when they have to be honest with themselves. But that has been my balance, is that when we get to the performance, that is the assessment. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But we have been assessing ourselves up to this point. And I think that's where we kind of really, really trip ourselves up, is that we all of a sudden go to festival MPAs and we say, that's the score. I have never had a festival score since I started doing that. That wasn't exactly what the kids said beforehand. Mm-hmm. Ever. They've never been shocked. If even more so, they're like, oh, the judges were nice because I gave me a 3. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And they own it. They own it. It's all about student ownership.
Yeah. But I think too, if you think of the scenarios of you on the podium working 20 minutes with the flutes while everybody else has to be quiet, versus you sent them all off with different tasks and then came back together and worked together. I just feel like that in that second scenario, you have to be, I don't know how you wouldn't improve 2 times, 3 times, 4 times more, faster, because everybody was on task and didn't sit and wait for the next step from you. So I feel like, just the reshaping of, how you would do an ensemble, a rehearsal has just got to be in itself, right? A way to improve faster.
And it does start with a very high expectation. Mm-hmm. So when I taught at Western, when I said 98% were beginners, I would say we're high school, we have to play a grade 3. Mm-hmm. And I would let them have a listening party. Here's all the grade 3s. Pick the ones that you think you would like to play. And sometimes I was tricking them because I've given them a survey digitally and I already kind of know where they're headed. I'm tricking them. They don't know I'm tricking them. And the students would say, oh, okay, I like this. And that's like, oh, that's a 4. Y'all really want to play it? They're like, no, we like it. And they would have to go from beginner to grade 3 or 4. Yeah. Some years it was the 3, some years it was the 4. It really depended on the students. And people would get on stage and it was like, how? I said, I'm not doing this. Like, they're really doing it. They're exploring their way to excellence, so to speak. And people were like, they're playing way beyond their years. I was like, well, other countries do it. Mm-hmm. Other countries have a different model with students. I will put a very high expectation. I say, we have to play at least a 3. You pick the ones that you think we can approach. And I will learn, with technology, things like smart musical practice first and those things where they can listen. And YouTube, they would have they have favorite composers. And I teach in Baltimore City public schools at the time, and very stereotypically people can say these kids are not interested. And I was like, well, no, you just haven't found things that they're interested in. Yeah. And the students come back and say, have you heard this piece by John Mackey? I'm like, do tell. What is this piece by John Mackey? And they were like, oh, that just feels like me. And actually it's because they had a breakup. And I was like, oh, let's go with that. We can tap into some emotions on this. And this all-girl band would play all this aggressive music, and people like, it's like, don't stereotype them. This is how they feel right now, so let them go with it.
That's so fun. Oh my gosh, Krystal, this has been awesome. And like just listening to how you work with the students and And it sounds like just how much awesome music making is going on in the classroom. I love it. So if somebody wanted to connect with you and learn more about your work and what you're doing, what's the best way that they can do that?
Well, the best way is through since I'm the music tech chair, they can go to the Maryland Music Educators Association website. I have my own music technology link right on the homepage. Awesome. And they can go directly there. And I update the list of apps quarterly. So it's within real time. Like if I go to a conference and I see something cool, and I played with it a while, I put it up there. I put the cost, if there is one, and I always try to stay under a certain number. I don't list anything under like $10, unless it's like one of those big subscriptions that you can get as a school. But like the most practical apps are $0. Like, go with this. And so that's the biggest one. My email address I use for the state is kmwilliams987@icloud.com. That's how I take any inquiry from anybody across the country. And I do check it. And then I run a podcast called Diary of a Lady Band Director, where we just talk about general education things, problems that we kind of meet as band directors. This is an all-woman panel. I was trying to give, the more marginalized community a little voice. And so those are all the ways. And I'm kind of on social media all over the place.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to provide links to all that in the show notes. All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciated your time. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
We'd also love for you to consider sharing this podcast with a friend and leaving a positive review. That's one of the best ways to get this message to new listeners.